South Korea is an emerging world leader, the world's 7th largest exporting nation. They make more ships than any other country.
We look at Korea today, it is emerging at such a pace that it's almost blindsiding some people right now.
They're exporting more memory chips and display panels than anyone else on Earth.
People who know this country view it the same way as we do, that it is a very dynamic, very energetic, hard-working country.
They're designing brand new transport systems.
South Korea has developed at an extraordinary rate, and a lot of that is to do with the fizzing energy, the frenetic pace of the economy and the sheer energy that people are willing to invest in it.
And they're creating world-class art, cinema and music.
It's exciting for music to be such a big part of culture here.
In the last 100 years, South Korea has been invaded, subjugated and divided. But within 2 generations, it's brought about an economic miracle that's changed the face of the nation and put this country of nearly 50 million people onto the world stage. In the 7th century, 3 kingdoms came together to form Korea. Today, the country's physically divided, the result of a war that began in 1950 and never ended. The fighting stopped in 1953, but an uneasy ceasefire carries on. The Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, marks the divide between South Korea and the Communist North. 2 million soldiers patrol the border. It's the most heavily fortified on Earth. Sitting at the end of a peninsula, South Korea is the size of Kentucky, with Japan to its east and China above North Korea. In less than 6 decades, South Korea has risen like a phoenix from the ashes to become an economic powerhouse with ambitions to match. On the international stage, it's hosted an Olympic Games, co-hosted the World Cup, and in 2010 it became the first Asian nation to host a G20 summit. President Lee Myung-bak welcomed the world's leaders to discuss economic and social issues.
구체적인 성과를 도출하기 위해서 노력할 것입니다.
In the United States, where we're on track to cut our deficit.
It put his country at the top table of international politics and highlighted the differences between the 2 Koreas.
Koreans by nature are optimistic people. We couldn't have survived the war and the poverty had we not been optimists. But I think with one big caveat, that we have a huge challenge looming over the horizon that most of our peers in the G20 don't have. And that is the challenge of what to do with North Korea. We have the fear that this might lead to another conflict that destroys everything achieved. They've broken the armistice on numerous occasions. Most recently, the unprovoked sinking of one of our naval vessels, the artillery shelling without provocation of Yeonpyeong Island, the harassment, the threatening. All of this casts a very long, dark, uncomfortable shadow over South Korea.
North Korea remains a secretive, totalitarian state. Run by a dynastic family who've controlled it since the ceasefire, it has one of the world's largest standing armies.
North Korea, after the Korean War, was equally devastated, but having had an industrial base prior to the Korean War, the North Korea recovered faster, and even into the late 60s, North Koreans were relatively wealthier. Not a great deal, but they were better off than South Korea. But today, they're 1/30th, if that, of our GDP.
South Korea is a country that was raised by war, and that total destruction of the war has given it a lot of the impetus for building from scratch. So when we look at many of the industries, people were willing to take very bold decisions because essentially they had nothing to lose.
The foundations of South Korea's economy were built through government-sponsored schemes that encouraged the growth of family-owned industrial conglomerates known as chaebols. two of the most globally significant chaebols that have dominated the country's economy are Lucky Gold Star, or LG as it is today, and Samsung.
Samsung started out in 1938 as Samsung General Store, which was a trading company which sold dried fish and other foodstuffs.
Our history starts from 1947. We started out as a small manufacturer of cosmetic facial creams for women. And then we ventured into other industries such as plastic materials, healthcare products, household goods, electronics.
After the devastation of the Korean War in the 1950s, Samsung began to move into new business areas to help rebuild the Korean economy. Some of those included, for example, textiles and sugar refineries. Now, by the late 1960s, Samsung began to move into the electronics industry.
Hyundai is another of Korea's top chaebols. Its founder, Chung Ju-young, was born into a peasant family. He typifies the post-war breed of South Korean entrepreneurs.
He went on a whirlwind tour of Europe. He first of all secured a set of orders from the Greeks that if he were able to build a shipbuilding industry, then they would buy ships from him. Predicated on that, he then travelled to London, where he met a first of all rather sceptical Barclays Bank and told them that the Koreans would build ships. And something about the charisma of the man persuaded Barclays that they should fund his project. And from nowhere he went back down to the small fishing town of Ulsan, built dockyards, started building ships, and before long the Koreans were the biggest shipbuilders in the world.